Hey everyone, this is Mark Ryan coming at you with another video. Now, this live stream is pre-recorded. Why would I do that? So that I don't get in trouble and I can edit stuff if I say something that's stupid or that I just don't need to say. Why? Because it would be fair to say that I'm biased here and I have a side that I am defending. I'm objective. I can say that. And beyond that, I would assert that Julie Roys is not a journalist. She isn't. Stop calling her a journalist. Julie Roys is an activist. And we can just clearly see this in her reporting. Why? Let's just take John MacArthur's church. over 20 stories, about 25 on how he handled COVID-19. Meanwhile, other churches like J.D. Greer's, Andy Stanley's, there's 1,000 other churches out there. And does Julie Roys write 25 plus stories on how they handled COVID-19 or my church or whatever? No, she doesn't. And beyond that, let me say she has an unbiblical worldview on how churches should handle that sickness going on, where she puts the state as head of the church instead of Jesus Christ, where the state can tell you, stop taking communion, stop singing, stop doing X, Y, Z thing that God's commanded us to do. Now, folks have started sharing that Julie Roys does not go to church. And I take that to mean that she's not a member of a local church. And I don't know if she refuses to obey the Bible, hopefully not, and be a member of a local church. And it shouldn't take a long time. It should not take years and years and years and years to do. She's not a member of a local church. Maybe she's looking for one. Let's hope for the best and hope that she is looking to have that accountability in her life. And part of the danger of that is that she is demanding John MacArthur, he needs accountability. Meanwhile, Julie Roys is not a member of a church, does not have accountability in her life. So when she's demanding others have accountability and she does not have accountability in her life of being in a local church that can practice church discipline, like if she were to slander others or cause trouble and quarreling amongst believers, that would be something that her local church could talk to her about. But she's not a member of a local church, so how are they going to talk to her about it, her issue, loving, compassionate church discipline, when she's not a member of a local church? How can she demand accountability for others when she is not accountable herself? And honestly, that goes to Matthew 7, judge not lest you be judged. And so when you're demanding accountability for others, but you are not accountable yourself, take the plank out of your eye, go fix that, and then continue what you're doing, right? And folks are finally starting to see it. Julie Roys is bearing false witness from time to time in her reporting. And that's why she's an activist and not a journalist. Let me give an example. One would be, a very clear example would be, it appears that Ligonier has removed John MacArthur from speaking at their conference, preaching, whatever it was. Well, appears is the big word, and it kind of covers her butt. Well, it appears that way, but who knows? Could be right, could be wrong. Well, it turned out she was wrong. And so what happens is rumors get spread from people that cover that stuff. I've talked to them even. Well, what? They removed John MacArthur from it? No, it turns out his health, family health reasons. It had nothing to do with that. And so that is a form of bearing false witness. We can bear false witness in headlines. We'll get into it a little bit later, but I could do it right now. A very clear example of a way that I could do it. And as Christians, we should not operate this way. Let me say this first, and then give an example of how we should not operate. There is a book that's gaining traction that Julie Roys wrote, and it's under criticism right now. Why? Because she had an inappropriate relationship with a teenager. A teenager, and we could go even further than that. Now, there's a chapter in Julie's book, Redeeming the Feminine Soul, which shares a story of Julie Roys having this inappropriate relationship with a senior in high school. I believe she'd be 19 years old. And the way that Julie presents the story, the problem, it's not with her, it's with the 19-year-old girl, teenager, in that she's manipulating Julie, and there's that going on. In other words, like Julie's the victim, or not taking ownership, let's say. And the problem with that, though, was that at the time, Julie is in her mid-30s, I believe 35 years old, and the girl's 19. And so she's like a youth leader, Julie Royce is, leading a 19-year-old, blaming the 19-year-old. While she's in a position of authority, a position of power, she has a responsibility really before God. And Julie begins sharing she became entangled and meshed. There is just this emotional relationship with this 19-year-old lesbian girl actually going on. She's trying to help her. And Julie Royce has a dream of that girl like sleeping, like in bed between her and her husband. And folks have pointed out, hey, if there were a guy, say John MacArthur, say whoever, having a dream like this, where there was, it doesn't matter, a guy or gal in bed between their spouse or whatever, that would be probably front page of Julie Roy's report. Probably depending on who it is too, though, if we're to be honest, because again, she's an activist. But if that was John MacArthur's story, that would be front page on her report. So we see off the top of the ball, we see there is not equal measures with her report. It's not fair. And I hope that more people will at least be able to admit, hey, Julie Royce is an activist. She is not fair. She is not balanced. And folks are pointing out, hey, Julie, like, that was spiritual abuse going on there. You were older, you were the leader, you were in a position of authority. And then in the book, when you read it, she's blaming the victim. And Julie came out with a response to it. And I think we'll read it. And others have pointed out that, hey, Julie, what's going on here? You can't, you're saying in this response, oh, you misreported, there was an error going on here. So you can't report your own story right, but you're going to report other stories right from 20 years ago where it's not your story. You're going to get them right. So you can't get your story right, but you're going to get these other stories right. I think that this should, of course, I've been there from the beginning, say, I don't think she's credible. Especially 25 articles on COVID-19, about 25, somewhere around there, concerning John MacArthur and the church going on there. And John MacArthur's church is about the size of my hometown. Understand that. With Julie Royce, you look at her articles and she'll place the church in the place of Jesus Christ, which is very dangerous. And I won't even go there right now, actually. But with that, hey, let's take a look at her response. It says, in my 2017 book, Redeeming the Feminine Soul, I relay a story that emerged from what I remember as one of the most painful times in my life. I shared the story because it showed how I had failed to help a troubled teen because I had not first dealt with my own issues. And by telling the story, including my own missteps and subsequent journey to healing and wholeness, I had hoped to encourage others to recognize their own issues and do similar work. And so she's saying, hey, I made mistakes here, missteps here. She does not use the word sin, I think, throughout this entire response. We'll listen for it. But sin is not a word that she often uses. And so honestly, it does not have that biblical worldview. Now, Julie Royce isn't a member of a church, so she might not know what church discipline is, getting a nice shot in there, right? So it's weird though. You can see another double standard in that, hey, John MacArthur's church, they need to get church discipline right every single time. But meanwhile, Julie Royce, church discipline, that's not even a thing in her life. She goes on to say, over the past several days, I've been confronted for the way I framed the story, especially assigning blame to someone who at one time had been a student in a ministry I helped lead. And so again, she's assigning blame to the student, but not taking responsibility for her own actions in her book. And so what she's framing that wrong, it seems like she's able to communicate that. It should have been obvious to me that I held a position of power. I regret I didn't see this at the time I wrote the book, and I regret I didn't own it more fully when this was first brought to my attention recently. I'm very grateful to a faithful friend who compassionately, and as Christians, when we correct others, we do it compassionately. If she were a member of a church, maybe her church could talk about it with her compassionately. Yet honestly reached out and helped me realize my error. When someone who holds the balance of power feels powerless, it is concerning and it is wrong. And so in her story, where she is assigning the blame not to herself, but to the teenager, like she was wrong there, and we could use words like sinful and things like that. For me to write that I felt manipulated in the relationship, for example, was completely off. And the fact that I only recently recognized my fault shows that I clearly have more of my own work to do. And so, if we wanted to use the same slimy, sleazy tactics that Julie Royce does, where we're bearing false witness and the smile of God isn't upon us, we could come up with a million headlines there. I could have I thought about it. I could have a thumbnail, and it could be the story from Julie Royce's book. What happened in that story? Again, I don't know if I talked about it earlier, but she had this dream of this 19-year-old from youth group, high schooler, who was a lesbian that she became really entangled with. There's an enmeshment, a really close relationship where the boundaries they're just blurred. But she had a dream that the gal was in bed with her, between her and her husband. And that's in the book, and it's pretty cringy what's going on there. And as Christians, if we were to adopt the same tactics that Julie's adopted with John MacArthur, we could have so many headlines. We could have so many thumbnails. I could put a thumbnail in as, what was it? Julie Royce, with a teenager in bed with her, between her and her husband, could do that kind of thing. That would be sleazy. That would not be God honoring thing to do. But it would be the same kind of tactics that Julie Royce has employed. There's some serious questions there, like being a member of a church. How important is that? And with her criticizing John MacArthur over and over again, and yet churches that disband for a year, Julie Royce crickets out of them. And she doesn't do the 25 stories on them. And so we can see that she is biased, and we can't just take her for her word. There may be a few. The older that you get, the more that you come to realize that media and journalism nowadays, hey, it is so biased. They don't even pretend not to be biased. And for Julie to pretend not to be biased, please, just save me on that. Just save me. If you think she's not biased in the comments, let me know, and I'll have a good laugh for the day, to be honest, right? But again, she says she reaches out to a professional, should be a pastor. She should be talking to her local church that she's a member of. All of us should be a member of the local church. Beyond that, I understand how important it is for me to grow in this area, and I'm committed to the process. She reaches out to her publisher. Well, again, like others have said, Dear Woke Christian and Mike as well, hey, like reach out to your pastor, go talk to your pastor about this in your local church that you are a member of. I want to go on to say that I think other YouTube channels that platform Julie Royce, that was very, very irresponsible of them to do. But with that, hey, I'm going to end the video before I get too heated, right? But what should we take away from this? Julie Royce should be a member of the local church, and I don't think she should be writing articles until she's a member of a local church. She should not be holding other Christians who are members of churches responsible while she's not a member of a church. Why? Take the plank out of your own eye before you grab the speck out of other people's eye. And maybe something happened. Maybe Julie's in the process of looking for a church. Maybe. Who knows? But we could put that, the best construction on it. Well, should you be critical of others who are members of churches who have authority and accountability while Julie has zero accountability in her life when it comes to her and a local church that she is a member of? Now, I want to go on to say that Julie Royce releases this report, not of her abuse of this teenager, the abuse of power going on, but she releases this report of John MacArthur and the abuse that went on in Grace Community Church with Mr. Gray right before or during surrounding the Shepherds Conference. And then what does she do? She demands, hey, people at that conference, I think Steve Lawson was there, I think Vody was there, there were a lot of folks there. Hey, Owen Strauchen, hey, why aren't you speaking into this cover-up that's going on and the scandal that's going on? Meanwhile, Julie Royce has a conference of her own, the Restore Conference. It's an oxymoron, but she calls it the Restore Conference. And there's folks there like Karen Swallow Prior, who she's been, there's some controversy surrounding her right now as well. Maybe I'll talk about in another video, but should we call on Karen Swallow Prior, hey, you should confront Julie Royce on this, so that, again, there's equal weights and measures going on. Because, hey, if you're demanding that people surrounding John MacArthur, that they come and speak into this and there be accountability going on, well, Julie Royce, shouldn't there be accountability for her abuse of power with this teenager that she dreamt was sleeping between her and her husband? And she's victim blaming in the book. And, if the victim's reading it, she's victim shaming in the book. It's the victim's fault and not her fault for what was going on there, even though that she was mid-30s, about 35 or so, I believe. And the other person was a teenager. And so are people at Julie's conference, are they going to confront Julie Royce, maybe even publicly? Is that something that Julie Royce wants? Mercy for herself, no mercy for John MacArthur, or law for John MacArthur and law for herself? What is what's the end goal there, really? And yet, let me say, take a moment and just on a serious note and a positive note, more of an edifying note. As Christians, there is no forgiveness within the social justice movement, and there is no justice within the social justice movement. One of the things that marks the CRT movement, the social justice movement that Julie is a part of, and you can really see it by the way that, again, she's more of an activist when she's uncovering racial trauma that caused Kyle J. Howard to gain, it's either like 30 or 60 pounds of trauma weight. And so she's uncovering all this white supremacy from all these dirty white pastors in the church as well. That shows that she is more of an activist. With that, there's more that could be said, but we'll call it a day. Take a moment, give this video a like if you haven't, and we'll see you in the next video.